we're presenting on flood insurance in the Tucson area. We're going to be talking about how to lower your risk and how to lower your costs associated with flood and erosion hazards. Today we have several agencies representing floodplain management in the southern Arizona area. We also have the Department of Financial Institutions, a state office, Arizona State Office, also joining us today. Next slide. The intent of this presentation is to provide you with information about lowering your risk and associated lowering your hazards and lowering your potential for erosion and flooding for your properties, and lowering related costs. If you have any questions, you can add that to our team chat, and those that are presenting today will help answer questions. We've also posted some information in the chat so that you could read about some links, the helpful links that are provided in this presentation. Today we have myself, Elizabeth Leipold. I work at the City of Tucson in Floodplain Administration. And then we're going to next hear, after the city presentation, we'll hear from Scott Bennett, who is with our town of Oro Valley, and then Dustin Ward from the town of Marana. Nalo Valley is not available. I'll be going over his presentation. And today, I think he might be available tomorrow. And then Patricia Gilbert from the Pima County Regional Flood Control District will present on Pima County information. And then we have James McGuffin from the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, who will wrap up our presentation today. Again, if you have questions, please post it in the chat. Today we have quite a few people joining us, and I'd like to get, if you can raise your hand, please let me know if you are a resident. If you could raise your hand now, please. And if you are from a real estate agency or a commercial developer or contractor, if you could raise your hand now. Okay, so Tucson is unique. We have a lot of rain during the monsoon. Approximately 7 to 8 inches may occur in the summer, about 3 to 4 inches in the winter. Southern California gets about 3 inches in the winter, and so we get substantially much more rainwater, and yet we're a desert. And a lot of that has to do with our climate as well as the soil conditions. During monsoon, we have convective cloud conditions, and those clouds come through and are what we call chubascos, that are types of thunderstorms that roll through, and they may dump water in just one area of town and not rain on across the street even. So the types of storms we have are very unique, and there's a lot of precipitation coming up from the Baja area that can provide us with hurricane type rain precipitation that may last for several days. So we have different types of storms, and then we have a desert condition. Next slide. So there's various definitions of flooding, and the City of Tucson, as well as other jurisdictions, use various types of equations and data to determine how flooding may occur within our jurisdictions. Next slide. And so various hazards can occur from these flood conditions. and they're listed here. You can read through it, but in some cases we've seen tornadoes, and we have various amount of debris flow that can cause hazards in our box culverts if they get clogged. And so we look at various aspects of floodplain management, and we try to inform the public of these hazards. And then we also try to encourage people to understand their flood conditions for their property. And then we also encourage in the city of Tucson that everybody consider getting flood insurance, because you just don't know what type of storm is going to come and hit. We have people up on a mountain that have flood insurance. And so, erosion and flash flooding can occur and can flow into homes. And this type of hazard potential is why we encourage people to consider it. Next slide. Um, the city of Tucson prepared a floodplain management plan. I consider it an easy read. If you're interested in reading um, this document, the link is in the chat. And next slide. So the Federal Emergency Management Agency administers the National Flood Insurance Program, and those uh, that agency flood insurance program creates these flood insurance rate maps, and those maps show where the FEMA flood plains are. And FEMA also provides us with other types of floodplain regulations that are the basis for the local floodplain ordinances. The local jurisdiction issues floodplain use permits and does the reviews for any type of work in a floodplain. When we do certain activities as a community, we end up obtaining points from the National Flood Insurance Program, and those points equate to reduction in flood insurance. Um, any Anybody could get flood insurance, and you can contact your insurance agent to find out what types of option costs there might be for you. And keep in mind that those people that are in the high risk FEMA flood zones are required to have flood insurance if they have a federal loan. Next slide. In the city of Tucson, we have two types of regulatory flood prone areas: the FEMA flood zones and then local flood zones. Some of the local flood zones are mapped, and we have information at the engineering office here at the Public Works Building, and we can provide you with that contact information later in the presentation. It's a great idea to get your flood status for your parcel, whether you're purchasing a new building or property, or whether you're just in your property for years and you don't know what your flood status is. In some cases, some people have had their property over many years, and later when they decide to sell, they determine, oh, oops, I'm in a flood zone. And it may be because they hadn't been paying flood insurance because they paid their mortgage. So it's a good idea to check your flood status. This slide talks about or shows a fence with debris. It's in a flood zone, and this can cause a hazard because flood waters can push debris against these fencing, divert the flow, or cause the flow to collapse in a certain concentrated instant and cause more damage. So we ask that walls and fences come in for permits. It's a $58, I think, fee to get it reviewed, and certain conditions may apply, such as making sure there's wall openings to allow the water to flow through. Next slide. In the FEMA flood maps, there's 3 types of risk. There's low risk, which are the X unshaded areas. That's the majority of the area most people are in. And then medium risk, which are X shaded. And then the high risk, which are the A zones. Next slide. The A zones are typically a blue or aqua blue shade, varying types of aqua blue on a FEMA flood map. If you're told that you're in any of the A zones, then you're in one of those high risk areas. This diagram shows the Santa Cruz River there with the aqua blue, and then you see some dots on the other side, that central area of the image. That's a shaded area. That area is protected by a levee. So the 100-year storm is protected or is contained by the levee structure that's on that side of the Santa Cruz River. There's other types of X shaded. There's X shaded 500 years, so a 500-year storm. Sometimes those are mapped, especially next to the regional water courses. You can find this information by contacting your engineering staff at your local agency. Next slide. So it's a good idea to check with your local jurisdiction and to find out which types of floodplain might be impacting you. Not only do they have the FEMA flood information, you should also ask about any local floodplain information. There's also erosion hazard data at these engineering offices. Next slide. The municipal and local floodplains are required to have permitting. So you'll need a floodplain use permit in the FEMA high-risk zones and the local floodplain areas. Next slide. So during these sudden flash floods, erosion can occur, and then you're going to need to look at, how to address it. So, what you'd want to do is, prepare, and there's various ways to prepare. Number one thing to do is find out what type of zone you're in, and then look at ways to protect your property with floodproofing and other solutions, preventive measures. Keep in mind that in the X zone, you do not have to have flood insurance, but those rates within the X zones are typically cheaper than the A zones. What's interesting to note that in the past, when we were looking at some data, a third of the floodplain flood insurance policies in the City of Tucson area were actually in the X zone. So there's a lot of people that understand that even in a local floodplain, it's prudent to obtain flood insurance. So quite a few property owners do have flood insurance, even though they're not in a FEMA required flood zone. This image to the left is showing a storm that's running through Tucson, and it's not particularly picking a certain zone, right? So like we said before, these storms are hard to predict, and sometimes they will last more than an hour. And in the case of in the City of Tucson, if you have a rain gauge and you have 3 inches of rain within 1 hour, that is considered a regulatory storm. Next slide. Here's an image back in 2006, the Rito regional water course. You can see it flowing, and it looks pretty raging. So this is the velocities in these in this runoff condition can cause quite a bit of scour. And luckily in this image, you can see that we have soil cement on the bank that protects the side of the regional watercourse. Next slide. So the city of Tucson does various things to help reduce risk. We update our ordinances, we make sure that permits are issued, and we review projects to make sure they're compliant with our drainage standards. We provide outreach, and we participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. Currently, the City of Tucson area property owners receive a 20% discount. In some areas, the communities purchase flood-prone properties when there's a problem with that site. The Pima County Flood Control District has a program to purchase properties, although the purchase price may not be the best number to look at. It is an option. Keep in mind that buildings can be insured, and also the contents. So if you're a renter, you can get a flood insurance property policy just for contents. Next slide. So the City of Tucson also has a sandbag program and Operation Splash. These are advertised annually before monsoon. The sandbag program provides sandbags and sand. You bring a shovel. Sometimes the staff will be out there to help you. The elderly staff or elderly folks can get assistance typically. Operation Splash sets up barricades at dip crossings. And then we also participate with the county on some emergency response projects. The county has a wide variety of like the alert system and drainage and precipitation data that can be obtained on their website. The property owners can also do various other things, cleaning out your gutters, making sure that your materials of your outer exterior of your building is protected properly. Regrading sometimes can help. Putting in interceptor swales in the side yard help direct the water away from your house. There's other things you can do. This presentation will be available on our website in a couple of days, so you can download this presentation, go over some more of these ideas. Next slide. For post-fire conditions, the burnt vegetation and charred soil make that soil water repellent, and so runoff is increased off of these wildfire areas. This increases flood potential downstream. Properties located below or downstream from these burn areas have an increased risk. This is not just for flooding, but also for debris flow. Keep in mind that a 1 inch of flood water in a home can damage approximately $25,000 of your home. Most homeowners and renters insurance policies do not cover flood damage. So that's why we do this presentation, to let you know that flood insurance is a separate policy and that anybody can buy it for their building or their contents in the building. For wildfires, there is a 30-day a wait period that is waived. It depends on when the fire is actually called as contained, and at that time and moment, flood insurance policies should be covered on if it's a runoff from a fire. There's other things you can do, making sure your debris around your house is removed so that that reduces your risk. And then because there's fires after floods, but also making sure the debris is collected so it doesn't run off into our washes also reduces risk. You can sign up at myalerts.pima.gov for local emergency alerts. Next slide. Some watercourses have protection to the 100-year or the jurisdictional flood event. In some cases, the height of that soil cement or embankment protection may have been built only to cover the 50-year storm. That's why it's important to check your property if you're near a local a regional watercourse to see if that embankment is containing the 100-year or maybe it's less than the 100-year. Next slide. You can go to the engineering staff at the local municipalities to verify your flood status. On properties that have an MLS statement, previous slide, please. Previous slide. On the MLS for real estate agents, there are 2 line items. It says FEMA flood insurance required, yes or no, and municipal flood permitting is required, yes or no. Check your MLS to see if it says that. Sometimes they're inaccurate. That's why you want to check with your engineering staff. Next slide. The engineering offices have various information from old elevation certificates, profile data of flood depths for the drainage ways nearby, as well as final plats that show drainage easements or other drainage related information. You can contact the City of Tucson at 520-837-5341 for flood status information. Next slide. You can also do flood zone status requests by contacting the City of Tucson Development Center online. It's a web page and you can go to that. Thank you. Next slide. Elevation certificate data is available. Elevation certificates are archived at the City of Tucson. If your property may have had an elevation certificate in the past, we should have it on file. That information shows what the finished floor is for a particular property building on that parcel. These construction certificates that include elevation certificate data are required when you have a building permit that is built within a regulatory flood area. A surveyor is required to fill this out in most cases, and in some cases, you might be required to put flood venting. Next slide. In 1968, the National Flood Insurance Act was started, and the National Flood Insurance Program was reformed by the 2 of the Congress people, Biggert and Waters. They were trying to make the policies more equitable, as there were certain parcels that were getting discounts and others were not. So they attempted to straighten out the NFIP program and the actuarials. In 2014, another attempt was done by Congress, and the Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act was created to help make that initial start at making these insurance policies more fair, making sure that they were a little bit more easier to transition to. So for instance, if you were paying $500 and you were supposed to be paying $2,000, they'd give you a sliding scale over the next following years to create a transition to the correct flood insurance rate. Next slide. Actually, there was a third attempt at straightening out the actuarials for flood insurance, and that was called Risk Rating 2.0. We do have the previous presentation that goes over risk rating 2.0. If you're looking for that information, that's available on our webpage. You can have this information. It's in the chat as well as on the City of Tucson Floodplain Administration website. Next slide. There's various resources, and we'll have this available to you on our webpage. Next slide. Please keep in mind that in June, we will have our Tucson Floodplain Management Plan update meeting. That'll be held June 11th from 8 to 9:30. That's on Tuesday, June 11th. And also June 26th on Wednesday, we're having our stormwater workshop. That pertains to stormwater quality. If you have interest in knowing about stormwater quality, please attend our workshop on June 26th. Agendas for both of these events will be posted on our website in the next week or so. If anybody has any questions, does anybody have any? You can raise your hand, post questions. Doesn't look like we have any questions. We have a clap, thank you. We're going to go to the next slide. Our next speaker is Town of Oro Valley. Scott.
Hello there. So I know that Elizabeth is presenting for the City of Tucson. And by the way, I'm Scott Bennett. I'm the GIS analyst for the Town of Oro Valley's stormwater utility. And she's presenting this material because you guys are part of the community rating system. We are not part of that because we don't have a whole lot of structures actually built within a floodplain, but we do still regulate to the 100-year floodplain level and make sure, you know, to an extreme degree that you don't build within them. And so we've got a few tools available to make sure that that you do that. And so next slide, please. So we have Town Ordinance Chapter 17, Floodplain and Erosion Hazard Management. That's basically what gives us the right to say you guys have to stay out of the floodplain and you have to engineer your property such that you won't flood or will reasonably not flood at the 100-year level. We have also created a floodplain, interactive floodplain map. I created a web application about 4 years ago that has all of the different floodplains that we regulate to, and it's the FEMA zones that Elizabeth spoke about, also the locally platted municipal floodplains that are derived as a result of subdivision platting, things like that, where engineers go in and make sure that any areas within the development are floodplains are delineated and you're not building within them. Next slide, please. So to get floodplain information from the town of Oro Valley, we've made it easy to get informal information with the floodplain inquiry map. You can go into the upper right corner of our web page there at the home page and type in stormwater management, and it'll bring you to that page, which you'll find a link to our map. And you'll also find a more formal process where you can get floodplain information from our drainage engineer, Dennis Roberts. And that's $15. And if you really want it studied and made sure that you're either in or out of a floodplain or there's any kind of anomaly that you see on the map, I would highly encourage you to go that route. Next slide, please. So this is just showing once you've gotten to our floodplain information, there's a few different links, one of them being the map and the process to do a formal floodplain information request. Next slide, please. So this is the floodplain inquiry map application that you'll find on the web. And it's pretty simple to use. This is what it looks like when you've told them that you're going to hold the town harmless with the little button that you have to click. Then you get this. And in the upper left there's a place to type in your address. Once you type in your address, you can go to the next slide. This happens to be one of the parcels that covers CDO High School. And right now we have the parcel highlighted, so you can highlight the parcel, get the information from that, like the parcel number, things like that. Print that map, and then next slide, please. You can highlight the floodplain, and it'll give you the information on what type of floodplain that is. This one happens to be a special study floodplain derived from the Pima County Regional Flood Control District's basin management study of the Carmack Wash. And this is the most up-to-date information we have. And this is what we are regulating by with permits moving forward. This was done in 2020. And you can print this map too. So it's got quite a bit of information there for you, and it's all free. These are the contacts for floodplain information. Paul Kiesler is our town engineer and public works director, and he's also the floodplain administrator. John Spiker is my boss. He's the stormwater utility division manager, and you can get a hold of us through either the pw@orovalleyaz.gov or the 520-229-4850. That one is a public works phone tree, and it will direct you through numerous information that you may want to obtain. One of them being reporting an issue or anything like that that will go to public works, and we can investigate. Same with that email. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions about how Oro Valley does things?
Okay, so next speaker is Town of Marana. Dustin, are you attending? Yes.
I am here.
Hi, Dustin.
Hi.
Dustin is Development Engineering Division Manager at the Town of Marana Development Services, and he's going to present on Town of Marana floodplain information. Dustin?
Okay. You can go to the next slide. So the image that you're seeing here, this is the pre-picture from the '83 flood that impacted the town. And then the next slide shows kind of the aftermath after it happened. Since this picture's been done, there's been some extensive work on the Santa Cruz that actually, I'm sorry, this is Cortero. Sorry, we have done extensive work along the Santa Cruz up in North Marana to kind of make the levee a little bit more robust. And through that process, it's actually helped remove a lot of the areas in North Marana from the floodplain. Now, next slide. So here we kind of have a three-tiered approach to protecting our residents. We are a CRS community. About 70% of our town is in a SF is in actually a FEMA floodplain, and then we have a few isolated local floodplains. So we protect and preserve all of the floodways, all of the natural drainage ways. We do this through a variety of the FEMA established floodway, and we also have some legacy zoning districts that are flagged as floodways, which prevent any development from occurring within the floodway or along the fringe of the floodway. So moving in, any new development that we do is prohibited within the floodway. New development adjacent to the floodway, they have to do engineering analysis to demonstrate that they're far enough away from it. The town does have established minimum setbacks, but we have occasions where clients will do studies to demonstrate that they can either get closer or that they've done protection devices that will allow them to reduce that setback. A lot of these have to go through rezoning processes, especially in some of the older areas that have that legacy zoning of a floodway. We try to preserve all of the natural drainage ways. And in the event that a particular development would need to alter it, they have to do drainage reports. But the water has to be picked up from where it enters the property, and it has to be discharged in the same location that it would leave the property naturally. And they cannot increase any of the water so that there's no negative effects on the downstream communities. And then we also try to eliminate any obstructions to the natural flood flow. You can go to the next one. So this map shows the actual Santa Cruz. The large blue line that's kind of running through is the Santa Cruz, and you can see down as from the southern portion of the map as you head north, you can see how narrow the Santa Cruz is. Those are the areas where work has been done along the Santa Cruz to provide soil cement on both sides, so that we don't have those erosion or the erosion zones allowing it to increase. But then as you get towards the north, where the Pinal County boundary is, that's where more of the older Marana is, where not a lot of work has been done. And that's where we have those actual floodway zonings that keep the people that any new development from moving into those areas, or they have to, again, do the actual studies and do the improvements, which is followed by a Clomer-Lomer before they can actually get into those zones. Then go to the next slide. So our regulatory tools is, we do have our website, which is our floodplain management. We've got brochures here at our Development Services Center. We do lean on Pima County for a lot of the wash monitoring. And then if there's any questions or concerns, we actually encourage you to almost come down or to call us. And then we would go through some of the concerns that we have with the development, things that need to be done to keep you guys compliant with our ordinance, as well as make sure that your property is safe. Our ordinance does address a couple specific items, that any new subdivisions that are built within our jurisdiction have to be removed from the special flood hazard area. And this is the Clomer-Lomer process. It is a lengthy process, but the goal that we have is to completely take them out of the special flood hazard area. We don't want them to have to necessarily carry the flood insurance. So we have in our code, it specifically says that any subdivisions greater than 10 lots have to remove them from the flood hazard area, and no construction can occur until the Clomer is approved, and no homeowners can move into those communities until the Lomer has become effective. The areas outside of the mass graded subdivisions, they just have to meet the ordinance standards, which we've got the 1 foot above the FEMA established, which is actually a state standard. We require floodplain use permits for all of the work within the floodplain, and they have to submit a finished construction elevation certificate for all of those homes. We do check each one of them. And then before the original is submitted, and that's before we release any restrictions that we place on the building permit. So we've tried to implement some standards on our side just to make sure that the homeowner can't get too far in their construction process that would prevent them from not complying with the ordinance and keeping them safe. We can go to the next slide. So this is a screenshot from our GIS system. Currently, a lot of this information is not available to the public, but we are working to make that available. But again, if they come in, that we can do a consult with them at the counter. We would show them the map and make sure we guide them to all the right documentations and the requirements that they need to comply with, so that they're safe. All right, they're safe. Oh, you can go to the next slide. So all of our levees and bank protections, the Santa Cruz is one of our major examples. And then Gladden Farms, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the large benefactors of this improvement. primarily pulled the entire Gladden Farms 1 and Gladden Farms 2 community out of the floodplain. Retention basins. All of our developments have to comply with what we call it the Northwest Marana policy. But it says that all basins that are constructed, they have to drain within 36 hours. They have to be designed for a 1 hour, 100-year storm. And then select areas of the town have to include an additional 100-year storm. Channels and storm drain systems, we've used these to remove the developments from the special flood hazard area, and then drain them into the basin provided. And then the basins they use a variety of different mechanisms to evacuate the water in the 36 hours. The goal is to keep them dry. A lot of our basins are multi-purpose. So a lot of our parks are in these amenities. Drainage basins are not always the prettiest. So we've set standards that allow our developers to use them for drainage as well as park amenities. And then all of what was listed above, the basins, levees, and then the channels are the different mechanisms that are part of the LOMR process that we use to get them out of the special flood hazard area. You can go to the next one. So our goal here is to protect our people and our infrastructure. We want to preserve the natural heritage that exists around the town. And then we're constantly striving for our vision is for future floodplain management to keep our residents safe, and also, make our community look as aesthetically pleasing as we absolutely can. I think that's the last slide. Are there any questions? Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dustin. Our next presentation is regarding the town of Sahuarita. And Nalo, as I mentioned, was busy, so he asked me to go over his slides. This particular, previous slide, please. This slide shows that the new bridge that was constructed, it spans the Santa Cruz River as part of phase 2 of Quail Crossing Boulevard in the Sahuarita area. Next slide. So for compliance for floodplain, Sahuarita has town code. It's Title 14. Their floodplain and erosion hazard management code states that all development and construction activities must adhere to the town of Sahuarita regulations. Next slide. You can obtain a town of Sahuarita floodplain use permit application at this website at their city, the town of Sahuarita. Next slide. Their contact information is here, 520-344-7100. And you can always email pwpermits@sahuaritaaz.gov for information about floodplain. Next slide. If anybody has any questions about this town of Sahuarita, you can post your comment or question in the chat, and I can have the town of Sahuarita, Oro Valley, get back to you. Next slide. Our next presenter is Pima County Regional Flood Control District. Next slide. Hi, Patricia. Can you turn on your mic? Are you there?
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Gilbert. I work for Pima County Flood Control. I have been a hydrologist there for about 17 years. We actually do not have a presentation today. We just have a couple websites to show you that we have a plethora of information on our website. And as most of the municipalities here, we do very much the same thing that you all are talking about. So that's really all I have to say. So there you go.
Thanks, Patricia. This slide shows Pima County's rain precipitation tool that's online. Like Patricia mentioned, there's quite a few links that you can find on the Pima County Regional Flood Control District website. Our next presenter is Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. James McGuffin.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. James McGuffin, I'm an assistant director with the Arizona Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions. Next slide. Okay, so that's my contact information. I believe it's also in the chat. So I know we're running a little close on time, so I'll try to get through this pretty quickly, which shouldn't be too big a problem. I wanted to talk a little bit about about our agency. We refer to it as DIFI, kind of rolls off the tongue a little easier than the long name. So DIFI is a state agency. It's consolidated about 4 years ago, where insurance and financial institutions came together under one umbrella, if you will. And the insurance side of the house, we do kind of, in a nutshell, we license all types of insurance companies and agents. That is actually about 400,000 licenses we issue within the state of Arizona. So the insurance industry is rather large here, like it is in most states. We monitor the financial health of insurers, because ultimately we definitely want insurers to be able to pay claims. When insurance companies go broke, that's a big problem for everybody. And we review insurance contracts before insurers can offer them. So in other words, when they come up with their rates for premiums, we can't necessarily change them within DIFI, but we certainly review them and we hold them to state statutes to make sure they comply. And then, of course, we answer a lot of consumer questions, and we do investigations of insurance companies and agents as well. Next slide. So when it comes to flood insurance, though, we have a pretty small role here in Arizona because we do not regulate government insurance programs. So there's been a lot of talk about the National Flood Insurance Program and the fact that that is a FEMA program. So that's a federal program. We take a lot of questions, get a lot of complaints, but we generally refer those to FEMA if we can't answer those type of questions ourselves. We do regulate other aspects, though, because there's a few insurers in the state. On any given day, there might be 5 or 10 insurers who actually offer private insurance for flood. And so because those are at the state level, if there's any issues, any problems or complaints with those policies, we do hold regulatory oversight over them, and we will investigate or look into any type of issues. Next slide. So just a few things, and I'm going to kind of go over this kind of quick, because a lot of this stuff has been mentioned in the previous things, but there are a few things probably worthy of reiterating. So of course, floods are one of the most widespread natural disasters in the U.S. You know, there's places you can think about where earthquakes are present, and tornadoes and hurricanes. But floods are something that happen all over the United States. So they're not regional in that nature. And it's also not just, there's been a lot of talk about rivers and maybe dry washes and that kind of overflow their banks every 100 years or so. But, we like to think about flooding in situations where you just get a lot of rain in a short amount of time. And so while that will certainly make rivers and dry washes overflow, that water, if it comes in your neighborhood, it has to find a place to go, right? So there's a lot of people that incur damage because of flooding that may not live near one of those river or dry washes. As a matter of fact, according to the National Flood Insurance Program, about 25% of those claims are in non-flood zones. So it is, it is something that people should take a very close look at their residence, the specifics of that, and just ensure that that they're confident that they're not going to have a water problem entering their house. So as has been mentioned, flood is not covered by homeowners or renters insurance. It is definitely a separate policy. And so while your standard homeowners insurance policy will cover a lot of different perils like fire and hail and wind, when it comes to flooding, it will not cover those. So you have to make some good decisions about protecting your what is likely your biggest investment, which is your home. And I won't cover the wildfires. That's already been, covered with the burn scars and why that runoff affects so many, places where the fire has burned up higher than the residents that it affects. So why should you research flood insurance? It's because every building is in a flood zone to varying degrees. We tend to think that, hey, if we're not close to some of those waterways, that we're not in danger, but that's definitely not true. And so there's been a lot of, or a few different websites mentioned today. I point out this one here, which is riskfactor.com. It's really easy to get onto that website. You type in your address, and it pulls up these same maps that everybody has shown you throughout these presentations. So it's a very easy way. It's consumer friendly. It gives you an idea of what your residence might look like compared to the flood zone. Waters that enters your home from outside at the ground level is what is considered a flood. It's not covered by your homeowner's insurance policy. That's different from sometimes you hear people say, well, hey, a pipe burst in my attic or somewhere and it flooded my home. That is covered by your homeowner's insurance policy, unless there's something strange about your policy. But generally, those type of things would be covered. But that's coming from inside the house, and that water is causing damage. But when water comes from outside your home and comes in at ground level, that is what is considered a flood for flood insurance purposes. And flood insurance policy, it may cost less than a homeowner's insurance, but it's definitely in addition. So you're talking about having two policies there. And with the, with the increasing cost of insurance in this state and nationwide, it's definitely a consideration. But obviously, insurance is there for a reason. It's there to protect your investment. It's to provide resiliency from, to be able to recover financially from these type of devastating occurrences that affect your home. So again, these are individual decisions by homeowners, but a well-informed homeowner is certainly the best one to be. Next slide. So I think this has already been mentioned. You can buy flood insurance policy. It covers your house and your structure. Keep in mind that, or I should say, the house structure and your belongings. So in your standard homeowner's policy, it does both, right? It's one policy, and there it covers the house, and then it covers your contents, and you pick those coverages. How much is my house worth? How much would it cost to rebuild it? How much are my contents worth? You tell your agent that, and the premium is based on what those decisions are. But when it comes to flood insurance, it's different. Those are two separate policies, a flood insurance to cover the structure and a separate policy to cover the contents. So things are just a little bit different when it comes to that. Again, renters can buy flood insurance for their belongings as well. They don't need to worry about the structure because they don't own it, but they do care about all of their furniture and anything else they may have inside the house. So if they live in a place where there's a possibility of flood, they may want to consider that if you're a renter. And then it's already been talked about how flood insurance requires an advance notice to purchase. 30-day waiting period is the standard. You can't see that storm approaching and think it's going to be a bad one and run and call your insurance agent and sign up for flood insurance. It doesn't work that way. There are some exceptions to this, but it's, for the most part, you know, like if you have a wildfire that's affecting your area, if you live close to that, you really do need to be on the ball and consider what the flooding aspect might be as a result of that. So that 30-day period can be eclipsed pretty quickly in that way. You kind of have to be on top of things to get that done. There are times where the 30-day period is waived. I think it's unusual. It's usually with the declaration of a federal disaster, and those don't. That is not necessarily easy to get. So just because there's a wildfire does not mean it's a federally declared disaster. So I wanted to show you this graph. This is like 48 years worth of history. This is from the National Flood Insurance Program, and starts in 1978, and we have 2024, so it's the most current graph that they have. It shows that over that span, there's been 5,266 claims in Arizona, and payouts have been about $60.5 million. Keep in mind that claims are only for people who have insurance, so it doesn't mean that this is the extent of flood damage. This are claims. This means that it's only the people who had flood insurance that could make a claim. And so Pima County specifically, over that time frame, had just under 600 claims, equated to $7.7 million. That's only, if you do the math on that, it's only about 12 claims a year in Pima County on average. But as you see this map, you can see that a lot of years are really low, but there's a few years in here that are really high around the state. And that could be the result of a really wet season. It could be the result of, you know, maybe a particular storm that came through that caused a lot of damage in just a couple of days worth of heavy rains and flooding. Next slide. So I guess what we would say to you is we would encourage every homeowner to be well prepared to make individual decisions based on good information. You can go to floodsmart.gov. Again, this is all just flood information. You can get to maps that show your residents this way as well. Be careful not to go to floodsmart.com because it will be an insurance company trying to sell you insurance. So it has to be the extension of .gov on there to get to the NFIP site. And or you can call your homeowner's insurance agent or company there. And if they can't help you, then FloodSmart will help you find a provider too, if you decide that you want to look into flood insurance. And the next slide. So, I know we've seen a couple maps here. This is one, this is kind of where I live in the Glendale area. And it shows that that waterway that's in the striations there with the orange and blue. It shows that that A zone there. So this was just kind of something that I typed in my address really quickly. Just wanted to see, I'm not in a flood zone. I don't have any type of issues with that. So I can make a pretty well informed and confident decision that I'm not going to have, that I don't need to have flood insurance. It doesn't mean that my house won't flood, right? If I get enough rain in my backyard and that water doesn't have any place to go, I could be in trouble. But at this point, I feel like I pay enough for homeowners insurance that I'm going to take this risk because I don't see it as being problematic for me. Next slide. Now this one is kind of interesting. This is the risk factor that I talked about. So type in your address and risk factor, and I know it might be a little difficult to see at the bottom of that graphic, the bottom of that picture, but this one lists 5 different categories of risk. And so as you can see that my house is a 1 out of 10 for the flood factor down there, which means very low risk, right? The fire factor, interestingly enough, has gone from last year, it was a 5 out of 10, which is a major concern, to this year, for some unknown reason, it has gone to an 8 out of 10. And my homeowners rates have reflected that as well. So this is just good information to have when you get your homeowners premium and you see a big increase, which is a lot of Arizonans are seeing right now. then this might be part of the reason that that some insurance service provider has given the insurance company information that the risks are elevated. But it also talks about wind, the air quality, air factor, and the heat factor within these residences, wherever you might live. So it's just interesting, and the fact that it's easy to get to for consumers it makes it all that much more appealing. So we would just encourage you to be well informed. Go to these sites, type in your address, and just take a look and see what goes on with it. So next slide. I think that's it for me. And I know we're a little bit over time, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
I had a question. Does Lloyd's of London, are they regulated by the state? I know that that's a insurance company that sometimes covers flood insurance policies for some parcels.
Yeah, I would have to do a license search because there's, if you're talking about insurance companies in Arizona, there's like today, I believe the last figure I heard was about 153 insurance companies who are licensed in the state. There's about just under 100 who have active policies, and there's about 71 or so that are actively writing new policies. So unfortunately, we're seeing that pool diminish a little bit because some of the perils that are present in Arizona, and it's not just Arizona, it's nationwide, where insurers are becoming more and more risk averse, and they're worried about the payouts on these claims for a variety of reasons, not just wildfire, but wind and water damage, even coming from inside the home that is not flood. So.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing, that some of the insurance companies are pulling out of flood insuring. And so it's another reason to make sure that when you're buying a property that it's not in a flood prone area, or, consider making sure that it's flood proofed or it has some sort of protection. I think we don't have very many questions in the chat. There was a comment that I posted that I think Patricia Gilbert also chatted here. We wanted to recognize that the Pima County has what they call a class 2 in the NFIP program for attaining credits, like I mentioned, in the NFIP activities that each jurisdiction might do if they participate in the CRS program. And the county has a discount for 40% on flood insurance policies. So if you're thinking about getting a flood insurance policy and you're in unincorporated county, now's the time to purchase, because of that. That's a great discount. All right. If there's no other questions, we are going to close the meeting, and thank you for attending. There's links in the chat if you want to contact us. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.